Hi everyone, welcome to my podcast, The Knitting Equestrian Nomad. This is season 1, episode 7. I'm calling this one Catching Up since it's been a few weeks and explaining Nomad Part 3. My name is Karina and I live in Western Washington with my 2 kitties, my partner, and my 2 horses. Today is July 3rd, so the day before Independence Day here in the United States. So welcome. If you're returning, welcome back, and thanks for sticking with me. I really appreciate that. For new viewers, hopefully I do have some new viewers. This podcast is primarily about my knitting projects. I was going to say first and foremost, but I don't know if that's necessarily true. I spend a lot of my free time knitting. And my horsemanship journey with my 2 horses, Odin and Bragi, the Mustangs. I adopted them from the Bureau of Land Management Wild Horse Adoption Program, and I'll talk more about them later. There's more history about the program and how I obtained them and their levels of training in previous episodes. So just for the sake of time, just like to get on with the explanation of why it has been a few weeks since I last recorded. My sister and her family drove out from Wisconsin. It was June 17th when they arrived, and they came out to help me celebrate my birthday and also to visit our dad, who is getting up in age, so it's always nice to spend time with our loved ones, regardless of age, but it seems more critical at this stage. Also, I had to work the weekend after they left, so that's why there has been a space of time that I have not recorded. So let's get on with it, shall we? Summer has officially arrived, although you would not be able to tell by looking out there today. It is kind of drizzly, but actually it's a welcome relief from, not only a true Western Washingtonian, or perhaps someone from the UK would say that. We seem to be a little bit sun adverse, although I love the sun. I love it when it comes out, and if it's been raining for a long time, I definitely crave it and will go on trips to seek it out. But we had one hot weekend. The weekend I had to work. I think it got up to the low 80s maybe, or maybe it was mid 80s, so quite warm. I mean, we've had a cool and drizzly spring with late frost dates, so it feels like we didn't really transition slowly out of spring and into summer. It's like all of a sudden we had summer, but then after that hot spell, it has just been absolutely perfect. I mean, the weather ranging from the upper 40s and 50 degrees to the low 70s to about 75 degrees. And to me, that is the perfect summer. That we are getting back to a little bit of rain is just okay with me. The sun will come out again. All right, so on to the topics at hand. Today I'm going to talk about my knitting, gardening, cooking projects, and my horses. These are the activities that I primarily spend my non-work time on, so hopefully you'd like to hear about them. So knitting, usually how I start out is I wear something that I have made. However, this I did not make, nor can I wear it any longer. So sorry this is in front of my face, but I'm still getting used to podcasting. But I wanted you to see this baby sweater. So this was one of my birthday presents. My mom apparently has been holding on to it for more than a half a century, which surprised me very much since she has moved around a bit in her adult life. But this baby sweater was made for me before I was born. Actually, I should probably hold it up while I talk about it so you can see the nice little cable detail. My great-grandmother had a friend, paid a friend to make this for me, and it was before I was born, so they didn't know whether I'd be a boy or a girl, which is why it's yellow. It's well loved, so there's, well, sorry about that, that's hard to see. So missing button, button about to go missing, but of course I won't wear it anymore. And then 2 buttons that are still, or 1 button that's, no, 2 buttons, here they are. 2 buttons that are still well attached. So yeah, my great-grandmother didn't knit, and I was the first great-grandchild in the family, so this is very special to me. It is now hangs away out of reach of the yarn murdering cats as a decoration in our bedroom. So I get to see it every time I go in the bedroom, and I just love it. So it's very special to me. So current projects on my needles. I don't have anything finished, not yet, but I'm getting close. So here is my raglan sweater. So you can see it has, I've made a lot of progress since the last time you saw it. So here it is. So I'm working on the ribbing now. So I'll do a couple inches of ribbing, and then the sleeves. So I'm sure I'll cast on the sleeves this week, because this is a project I've been focused on. This is self-striping yarn. It is DK Cake by Lion Yarns, which is, it's about 20% wool and 80% acrylic. So it should be long wearing, and it should be a good 3-season sweater. How about sweater? So a good 3-season sweater for, or, well, you know, it actually could be a summer sweater given the, you know, the typical summer temperatures around here. So, yeah, that is what I have on my needles. That is the one that is being close to being finished. I may have to play a bit of yarn chicken as I'm down to 1 good size skeiny yarn, but I have 2 sleeves to knit. So we'll see how long the sleeves are. I may consider doing a 3/4 length sleeve, just because it is kind of a lighter weight sweater. I've also been working on my Songbird mittens. So these, this is a fairly complex pattern, so it is, it's slow going. I can usually get about 3 rows done in the morning. So, but I was able to divide for the thumb. So this is the palm. So you can see this, hopefully you can see this pattern. The lighting's a little weird in here today. So it's just a kind of a diamond shaped pattern after the cuff. And then this is, I'm actually starting on the Songbird part of it. I think what these are is supposed to be branches. I'll show you the pattern. This is a paid for pattern. So I'll lose my place, but as you can see, it's fairly complex. So this is by Erica Huser Designs. So here's the pattern, and I am about to these kind of lower branches. So those are the Songbird mittens. Yeah, and this is the left mitten that I'm working on. Hopefully I'll have them done in time for winter, but you know, if I don't, well, that's okay. And another thing I've talked about before are these squares that, this is an Arne and Carlos project. This is for the summer, or sorry, the spring along, the 2022 spring along. So this is a dove. This is the first one I knit, which is called Pharaoh. And this is the first one where I learned how to do 2-stranded knitting or color work and having to purl. So on this one, my floats are a little long until I figured it out. So you can see I figured it out. And then now compare to this one, which there's hardly any float sticking out. So that's nice and tidy. And then this one, I think is, that's the third one that I finished. So I just showed you number 2, number 1, and number 3. And this one, the floats are also pretty tidy. So, and then the one that I cast on, and I'm working on, this is of their dog, Helmer. So these are free. The patterns for the squares are free. You have to go to the Arnie and Carlos website, arnieandcarlos.com, and go to their blog, and you can find the patterns there. So you can see I've got most of the dog body done. I'm still working on the head and the tail. So I may have that done this week. We'll see. The fourth thing that I have, I'm not going to show you because it might be a gift, and I understand that my nephew will occasionally pop in to view my episodes. So hello Frank, if you're watching, I'm glad you got to come visit us. So hope you're enjoying your summer back in Wisconsin. So that's all I'm going to say about that project, except that I am hoping to develop a pattern from it. So I'll talk more about that later, perhaps perhaps next year. So after the holiday season. So before I leave, kind of the garment part of the episode, I just also want to point out this, what I'm wearing was also a gift, birthday gift from a good friend of ours. So this is Odin and Bragi with this really nice embroidered motif. She said it was supposed to be a Christmas present, but due to supply chain issues, I got it for my birthday, which is absolutely fine. It's wonderful. It's perfect for a day like today. It's a little bit big, but when has that ever stopped me from wearing something that someone has given me? So so I love it. It's a great color, and I love the embroidery too. Gardening. So with summer weather arriving, the garden is starting to wake up. Sorry, I'm looking over at my notes, trying to advance the page on my computer, and it's a little bit pokey. So the biggest harvest from our garden has been the strawberries. We have picked several gallons of strawberries, given away strawberries, and I've turned them into frozen berries, into jam, into sauce for ice cream. And yesterday I combined the strawberries that I picked yesterday with some rhubarb to make a crisp. Sadly, I have more fruit than crisp because I kind of guesstimated the amount of crisp that I would need. So it's actually kind of more sauce, but it goes well on ice cream, and I may make some shortcake or something just to add a little more of that kind of starchy component to it. The strawberries are reaching the end of the first crop. These are ever-bearing strawberries, so I expect to get another crop. So they're not as tasty, which is, the rhubarb made a very good flavor addition to it. So, and I added cardamom to the crisp part of the recipe, which I think also adds a really nice flavor to that combination. The tomatoes are starting to fruit. So I have one little porch tomato. It's called Orange Hat. I think it's an heirloom small breed tomato. But anyway, it really struggled with this long cold spring that we have, and I was wondering whether it was going to live. Well, thankfully it lived, and it has flowers on it. So when it's next to the bigger tomatoes that have some fruit, so hopefully it will start setting fruit here soon, because I cannot wait to see what those tomatoes are like. The kohlrabi is maturing. Potatoes should be ready to harvest soon. So I have some potatoes out in the strawberry patch that just sort of ended up there, and then I have I planted in a bag. It's called a potato bag. It's about yay big and about yay tall, that you I think I put 4 potatoes in, and I expect to harvest those pretty soon. So looking forward to that, and I don't know whether I'll try for a second crop or not. I have a nifty garden planner from Territorial Seed that sends me reminders on what to plant, so that's pretty cool. Sometimes I follow it, and a lot of times I don't get a chance, but it is set to this region, so I should probably pay more attention to it. But I do what I can. I'm a what would you call it? Kind of a I'm not a fussy gardener. Well, I'm not fussy about anything, quite honestly, but it's sort of like I'll plant seeds, and if they grow, great, in the location that I put them, awesome. But if they don't, it's like, well, too bad, so sad, I'll try something else. So my garden is constantly an experiment. It's always different every year, but our weather is different every year as well. What else did I... I harvested garlic scapes yesterday too. So I want to say it was a couple years ago I planted garlic and didn't harvest it all. So I got more garlic last year, which I didn't harvest any. So I have this kind of jungle of garlic that's near the strawberries, and I think I'm going to clean those out this year, and maybe later when I plant garlic in the fall I'll be a little bit more conscientious about it, or maybe I'll put it in my some containers. Speaking of containers, I have a container that's, I don't know, like this long and about this deep, that I planted these carrots that are supposed to be well adapted to container gardening. And I had the container at ground level, but I noticed that the leaves were being chewed off. So I think what was happening is that the bunnies that live under the porch were dashing out for a quick snack of carrot tops and then going back under the porch. So I raised, I turned a plastic tote upside down and put the carrots on top of that, and the leaves are really starting to grow pretty nicely. So I'm hoping to harvest carrots pretty soon too. I transplanted beets, zucchini, cucumber, and lettuces into 2 much bigger pots. They're actually these kind of fabric bags that are rectangular shape that hold a lot of soil. In fact, they hold 2 cubic feet of soil each. So hopefully the zucchinis and I think the cucumber is well adapted to container gardening. The zucchini, I'm not so sure, but we'll see. That's just one of these experiments that I'm doing. So hopefully I'll get more harvest from that eventually in another month or so. I did harvest some kale and some chard from 2 rectangular pots that I've had out for a while. That I actually had to put in the shade because it was getting too much sun and not really liking that so much. Let's see. Also, I hung up the hanging basket of herbs. I think there's 3 herbs in there right now. Some oregano, some mint, and some parsley. So my goal this fall and winter is to have hanging baskets, maybe 2 each, of herbs and greens, so that I can harvest those over the winter whenever I need them. And that is it for gardening for now. There's always weeding, so I planted some flowers too. I had a teddy bear sunflower, which are really lovely, kind of soft fuzzy yellow sunflowers that will grow quite tall. Some zinnias, and then also some marigolds that I'll put with my tomatoes out on the deck. And on to cooking projects. I made yogurt in the Instant Pot. I use 1 gallon of organic whole milk, and I pour that into the Instant Pot, set it on boil, and then after it does that, I let it cool to about 115 degrees Fahrenheit before adding about a half a cup of yogurt from the last batch. Then I set the Instant Pot on 24 hours and let it do its thing until the beep tells me that it's done. This batch turned out a little soft, so I'm straining it, and I'll save the whey for something else. I could use it in my sourdough. I could use it in the next batch of yogurt. I'm not sure I like the 24-hour setting. It's a little bit cooler, I think. I like the 8-hour, but by the time I was done yesterday, it was 11 o'clock when I started the yogurt, and 8 hours from that would have been 7. Well, that would have been fine. I just didn't math very well with the clock. So anyway, maybe next time I'll do the 8 hours. I seem to get a little bit firmer result with the 8-hour setting. I made more carrot top pesto because it's tasty, and it's carrot tops aren't something that people normally eat, and one thing that I think is beneficial to health is not only eating a lot of vegetables, but eating a great variety of them. So carrot tops are very earthy tasting, and the pesto is quite earthy compared to the bright taste of traditional basil pesto. So for the carrot top pesto, I pick off the soft leaves out of the stems. The stems are coarse. You can use the stems in soup stock if you want to, or put them in your compost. I do either, depending on what I remember to do. Add a clove of garlic, about I think a half a cup of olive oil, and Parmesan cheese each. A few flakes of red pepper, and then some salt, and whirl it up in the food processor. And so we used, I think I made pasta with pesto and added some leftover salmon we had with that, and that was quite tasty. What else do I have going on? Sourdough starter is fermenting on the counter. I had started this, refreshed the sourdough yesterday, but found that it didn't quite make enough for today, so I'm making more, and hopefully it'll be ready for tomorrow. Tomorrow is a paid holiday for us, so we'll make sourdough bread tomorrow. And then for upcoming dinners, out of the current bounty of vegetables that are available, I'm making a beet borscht. I think I'll make that tomorrow night for when we have fresh bread. The borscht uses beets, beet tops, carrots, purple cabbage, and purple onion, and potato. And it's really tasty. A coworker brought in her batch, I think it was Friday, and it smelled so good that I couldn't even wait till lunch to try it. So it's just delicious. She uses Provence herbs too, so I got some of that, and I look forward to trying that. And you top it with sour cream, and then add it with a hearty bread like the sourdough that I'll be making, and it just makes a really tasty dinner, especially on these kind of drizzly days that we get occasionally in the summer. The other dish that I'm going to make is a zucchini pie, which probably sounds weird, but if you think about chicken pot pie, it's a savory pie. So this recipe calls for dry roasting, cut up pieces of zucchini and red onion. I use quite a lot of zucchini compared to the red onion. And I just put it on parchment paper and on a baking sheet and roast it for about 45 minutes at 375. So no salt, no oil. You just really want to dry roast it. And then you mix ricotta. I can't remember. It might be about 2/3 of a cup with an egg and some lemon zest. And I think you can add Parmesan or Swiss cheese or other ingredients and other seasonings. I typically use thyme and salt and pepper. I may try that Provence seasoning. That sounds kind of good for a vegetable-based savory pie. But anyway, you put that in your pie crust, and I'm not going to put a top crust over it, just the bottom crust, and then bake at, I think it's at 375 for about 40 minutes or so. So the dry roasting of the zucchini kind of removes a lot of the liquid. Otherwise, you get kind of soupy end product, and this just ends up being a really tasty pie. And finally, we are on to the horses. Yes, so I hope this appeals to everyone, whether you're a horse lover or not. So what I have been doing lately is I've been taking about 15 minutes in the morning before I go to work. So in other words, I am sacrificing about 15 minutes of my knitting time, my pre-work knitting time in the morning, and going out and working, playing with the horses. Usually it seems like Odin has been more interested in engaging lately. Excuse me. Get a sip of my tea here. I see a reflection. I think it's just the sun coming through and reflecting off. Well, that's my chair, so I don't know what this light is right there. And this is just the sun trying to get through the clouds. Anyway, sorry about that. Yeah, like I said, Odin has shown more interest in engaging, so we've been walking up to the front yard, getting in the trailer, and then doing some groundwork. And I even hopped on bareback. I think that was Friday morning. Yeah, so it's just, really quick little sessions, depending on what he's up for. I just always try to end on see what he wants to do, see what he's interested in learning, and whether or not he can engage. So one thing that happened early morning last week is that I was bringing Odin to the front, which is where I keep my horse trailer. It's a bit of a jaunt from between the front yard and the backyard, and there's a creek that goes between the house and the barn. So the driveway between the house and the barn goes, it's kind of level with the house. It goes down into the dip, over a culvert, and then back up to the other side where the barn is. And it's forested. It's kind of a wildlife corridor. So very different from the barnyard, very different from the front yard. And normally Odin is pretty alert when we go through there. It's just a different environment, and horses are naturally more in tune and alert in those types of situations. But he willingly walks up to the front yard with me, and one reason he's motivated is because he knows I always let him graze on the nice, lovely lawn grass. So one morning earlier this week, he was more alert than usual, and in fact kind of spooking. He was kind of jumping at things I couldn't see anything, I couldn't hear anything unusual. There's always birds chirping, but he kept looking over to the neighbor's house to the south, which there's a small strip of forest that separates us. And it was almost like there was a saber-toothed tiger or something over there, which of course there's not. But we do get coyotes, we get bobcats, we get mountain lions. We probably get bears. I've seen a bear across the road on the neighbor's yard. But I couldn't see anything, and it's daylight at that time of morning. So, I just really wanted him to pay attention to me, and I made a promise that, I would watch out for his safety if he paid attention to me. It was a bit of a struggle because he really didn't want to. He was really fixated on whatever it was over there. I just was, I guess the question I wanted to ask Odin is that even though you're really fixated on this thing, you're obviously uncomfortable, will you still go with me to the trailer? And he doesn't necessarily like the trailer. He's willing to get in, but he doesn't like it. And I was happy to learn that the answer is yes, he is willing in spite of all these other things going on. I had to work really hard to get his attention and keep his attention on me. And he got in the trailer, and I let him back out. And usually what he does is he waits for my cue to back out, and then we stop at the edge of the trailer before he gets his front feet out. Well, he just rushed right out, which is not like him. So we tried it again. He got in, And then we just worked on this piece of could he slow himself down and wait to get out completely until I told him. And yes. So we did. I was really happy with that, and he got to graze after that. So what is amazing to me about horses is that their senses. Their senses are so in tune with the environment. And generally when he's upset about something, I know there's a reason. I don't know what the reason is, because his senses are just far more acute than mine are. He didn't know what it was over there. He just horses have been around for 50 million years, so he has evolved to pay attention to anything that is unusual in his environment, until he understands what it is. So what impressed me the most is that he was willing to forego his own judgment about what could have been happening, and follow a leader that they trust. So in this case, it was me, which makes me very happy that I've worked on our relationship for this long. And thinking about that the horses are willing to do this just seems so generous to me that it just really makes my heart swell with gratitude that they are willing to do this. I mean, if you ever get a chance to see wild horses and understand how they operate, when Randy and I went to the Burns Horse Corrals in May, there was this one enclosure that had a lot of mares and young foals that seemed like they had been recently gathered, perhaps, but they were definitely still wild horses. I mean, I was a long way away from them, and they still, got their little foals up from their naps and herded them off to the other end of the enclosure where they felt safer. That is wild horse behavior. That's how they've evolved for anything that could possibly be a threat. And keep in mind that humans are predators. So, we don't have the same senses that we do. We don't have to, we have a different way of assessing our environment than horses do. But that a horse will trust a predator in that situation is just remarkable to me. So what I'm trying to say is, if you have a horse, trust your horse's senses. They are not being naughty for the sake of being naughty. That is not in their nature. They have evolved to be highly cooperative animals, and that is how they succeed. That is why they have succeeded for 50 million years. So if they sense something that may pose a threat, they are naturally just going to stop and look. Domestic horses may be a little less sensitive to this because they haven't had the same experiences as wild horses have. And it's been a while since I've had a domestic horse that may be a little bit, I'm going to use the word dull, and I don't mean to be insulting. It's just a way to describe their senses versus wild horses that are still highly sensitive. So, and again, since humans are predators, we may not have the same urgency to respond to all unfamiliar situations in that way. Some humans do. Some humans are highly sensitive, and that's how they respond to unfamiliar situations. But what does this have to do with the duck? Well, did I say something about the duck yet? I don't think I've said anything about the... Oh, I was... Sorry about that. Kind of skipped ahead in my story. So, much later in that day, a duck showed up in our yard and was completely bonded to Randy. Randy was home when the duck showed up, and it followed him everywhere. The connection to Odin is that the duck was probably hiding in that strip of forest between our property and the neighbor's property. And, Odin, I couldn't sense anything about it. I couldn't see it. I couldn't hear it. I couldn't smell it. But Odin sensed that something was there, and he didn't know what it was. He didn't know if it was a threat or, if it was just a duck. And, it's possible he's never seen a duck before either, so he wouldn't really know anything about ducks and would probably have to watch it for a while to understand that it may not be a threat. So, all that to say is, it taught me to really pay attention to Odin's responses when he is not giving me his attention. Because interestingly, the next day I took him on the same walk and he was just completely relaxed. So there was nothing in the forest that could bother him. So back to the spoiler alert, what about the duck? Another neighbor who has a mixed flock came to pick up the duck. And so happy ending for that duck. The duck was probably dumped. It was a drake, and not, people who want ducks for eggs don't. Anyway, that's the assumption that the neighbor made, is that the duck was dumped. I don't know, maybe it wandered because it's a male duck looking for its own flock. Who knows? But anyway, the duck got to go live with another flock. So, Bragi. So what's Bragi been up to? So I've been working with him on liberty leading. Eventually we will get to saddling and riding and stuff like that. But as I've said before, he's only 4. He's still growing. He's still got a bit of a baby brain. So I'm working on these just really simple things, just, getting him to, developing our relationship. So liberty leading is where I ask him to go with me without being connected physically via a halter and a lead rope. So, in other words, so when I go, he goes. When I stop, he stops. And I'm trying to get him to turn. So either turn toward me when I move away from him, or if I move toward him, to go in the other direction. He's not very good about turning. Let's say we're walking along and then we want to turn right. So I'm going towards him. He's always a little bit too far ahead of me. So he can't turn very smoothly in that other direction. It seems like it's still a bit of a surprise to him because he places himself so that I'm more at his shoulder. If he was where he was supposed to be, which is kind of near his ears or his eyes, he would have a better sense of where I am and he could turn in that direction more easily. He is very good at stopping and starting with me though. So, and that's, we build on that and then we practice the other things. So the other thing I did this week is I put the bareback pad on him because I used that when I rode Odin bareback around the round pen on Friday. And I just set it on Bragi after I was done with Odin. I didn't cinch it up or anything, but I just wanted to see how he felt about it. And he was completely fine with it. So I just want to make sure he's very confident about having that, and then eventually fastening it around his tummy before I move on to that. So I'm talking a lot about horses today, so I hope that's okay. So I was going to continue on with my story about the Nomad part of my handle. And last time I left off talking about horsemanship in Los Angeles, which included the hunter-jumper training that I was in, volunteering at the Therapeutic Horsemanship Center, which, by the way, Randy Jackson's daughter came along to ride with a friend there one time. The friend needed the therapeutic services. Randy Jackson's daughter didn't have any special needs as far as I was aware. So that was pretty cool. I never met Randy Jackson, though, while living in Los Angeles. So I was doing those activities and balancing that with the graduate work at UCLA. After I graduated in 2005, I moved back up to Washington for a job that I still have, and brought my horse with me. I put him in trainer with a hunter-jumper trainer that I knew back in the old days. I think I mentioned that hunter-jumper trainer in the first part of this Nomad Part 1. So yeah, that was like 1986 or 1987 when I met her. So it was really great to connect with her again and kind of close that loop and bring that horse in training with her. So I kept him here for a few years, but eventually I had to sell him because the my job was the status of my job was somewhat uncertain because it was 2008, 2009 when the economy really had a downturn, and I was afraid I was going to lose my job. So, and I had a mortgage to pay, so horse training became too expensive. So I sold him, which was really tough. It was a tough decision, but he ended up going to a lady who needed a horse that would not stop at the jumps, and Clipper was awesome. He would jump anything you pointed him to. Even if I set him up incorrectly and he had to kind of twist his body to get over it, he would still jump it. He would not stop. So, I mean, occasionally I landed on the ground because he had to jump in such a weird fashion because I set him up incorrectly, but he would still jump. So I think he was perfect for this lady, and from what I understood, he was going to have a home with her for the rest of his life. So I hope that happened. So that's where I'm going to leave off, is selling my horse Clipper. His show name was Up in Lights, and I still can't remember what his registered name was. Eventually I'll find it and I'll mention it. He was a cross between a paint mare and a thoroughbred stallion, I think was the way it went, or maybe it was the other way around. And the tradition with those is that you kind of combine the two names, but the name honestly didn't mean very much to me, which is why I'm having trouble remembering it. But I do remember that his show name was Up in Lights, because he was this lovely chestnut gelding that just had lots of kind of sparklies when his coat was really groomed up and gleamy. So selling Clipper was kind of the end of an era, and I didn't know what to do horse-wise for a long time because affordability was a big issue. So I had a good long think before getting another horse, and I'll talk about my off-the-track thoroughbred, in which I made a lot of terrible errors in judgment and made a lot of assumptions and had to completely re-examine what I had learned about horses in my entire life. So that ought to be an interesting segment, and I'm still learning. I think I mentioned that I grew up with horses. I started riding somewhat regularly with a friend when I was about 8. And now I'm a lot older than that, and being in a mindset for that long and then having to change it and really listen is very hard work. It doesn't matter if it's about horses or about something else in your life that you perceive that needs to change. It's very hard work to change your mindset, and it takes a lot of dedication and focus to break old habits. And that's what they are. They are old habits. So that's where I'm going to end this. I'll leave you with some inspiration, where I gathered inspiration this last time period generally this week, I guess, for horsemanship and knitting and gardening. So I started watching a new podcast called The Tao of Horsemanship, and I'll have a link to that in my show notes. I used to follow Elisa Wallace. She's a 3-day eventer, world-class 3-day eventer. But she also is an advocate of Mustangs and has competed in lots of Mustang makeovers. So I really enjoy her Mustang makeover videos. And then for gardening, the Grow Veg podcast. This is a British fellow named Ben. I really enjoy his. He's in the UK, so their season is, I would say, very similar to Western Washington. So I get a lot of inspiration for that. And he's been doing a lot on container gardening lately, so that's been fun for me as well. Even though we have plenty of room, I kind of like the manageability of container gardening. And then for knitting, Dan and Kay Jones, the Bakery Bears, also in Great Britain. I really enjoy their videos as well. So, where I can be found on Facebook, The Equestrian Nomad, on Instagram at CMEqunomad, that's CMEQNOMAD. Ravelry is Karina Law. My blog is equestriannomad.net, and then my email is theequestriannomad@gmail.com. So thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Good boy, licking and chewing. I'm looking at the little hoof print that he spun a circle in because he was pivoting. Hi, buddy. Bragi's headed out to pasture.